Can Democrats ever get their act together and figure out how to really run campaigns? Well, let's find out. We're going to talk to a person who's trying to help them do that. Amani Wells Anyoha is the operations director for Soul Strategies. Amani, welcome to TYT.
Thank y'all so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to be here.
All right, that's wonderful. So first, before we get to what you guys do, because a lot of people I don't think know how politicians run campaigns, period, let alone Democrats, let alone progressives. So how does a normal campaign work? How do people always hear about campaign consultants? Who are they and what do they do?
So that's a great question. So firstly, we do not like to refer to ourselves as consultants, because when you're working in campaigning, you will have a lot of people who come aboard to campaigns. They find out somebody is running. They slide in their DMs or send them an email. It's like, hey, I worked on Reagan's race in 1974. I know a lot about campaigning. Will you let me work on your race? And a lot of times those people will come in and just start telling them to do a bunch of random things. They'll ask for some big fat check and then do none of those things. And then they end up kind of butt hurt and there's really nothing they can do. Like they really need the help. So that's kind of the structure of it. But a lot of the times there's more important things that you need to be doing, like your ground game needs to be in place and you need to be doing fundraising. You need to be calling voters and donors in your district and familiarizing yourselves with them and letting them get to know you and know who you are. You need to be doing social media. You need to be sending out emails. And the most important thing is you need to be active in your community. People need to already know you. You need to have a reputation there. And if you don't, you need to get on that ASAP before the election comes.
So, Imani, help us understand the difference between you guys and traditional Democratic consultants. So give me a sense of what they do and what you guys do.
Yes. So what we do is the actual hands-on campaign labor. So we give strategic advice along the way, but that's not the selling point. The main thing that we're doing is executing this work that needs to be done on these campaigns. So instead of coming in and being like, oh, you should knock doors in your district, or, oh, you should post this messaging online, or you should carry yourselves this way or that way. We're the ones that are literally on the ground in the district knocking those doors. We're the ones creating the social media posts and posting them and writing the emails and cleaning up their list and growing their audiences. We're the ones on the phone with the campaign and with the candidate doing call time with them via Zoom for hours a day. So I think that's the primary difference, is we're the ones actually executing it like a surrogate staffer would, per se.
Interesting. And these days, the folks helping on campaigns are starting to split into groups, the more establishment Democrat groups and the more progressive groups. So where do you all fit in?
Definitely with the more progressive groups. We don't work on Republican campaigns at all. And whenever we're in races, we try to find the most progressive candidate in the race. A lot of the people that we worked with in the past are first-time campaigners. Like, they've never ran a race. They come from low-income jobs, or this is their first time kind of getting their foot in the door. So we kind of want to come in and guide them and give them that help in a way that they can afford, in a way that they won't get from the establishment.
So, Amani, let's talk about what people do wrong and right on campaigns. And there's different kinds of people. So first, let me ask, what's the most common mistake that rookie campaigners make, regardless of their politics?
Yes, I would say hiring a consultant without understanding what it is that they are going to tangibly do for your campaign. A lot of the money that people get while they're running could be better used for a field, in our opinion. We ultimately want people to raise enough money to be able to go door to door and talk to people. So a big mistake we see is that a campaign raises that initial money. They got $50,000, and instead of getting something tangible for it, they hand it off to a consultant. That consultant makes these promises and then nothing happens. And that's a lot of the times where we end up finding these people. We'll meet them, midway through the campaign, and we'll hear their stories and they're like, yeah, I have spent all of my money and I cannot tell you what I did with it. So I think that's the number one mistake, is just make sure you know what you're getting and how it's going to help the campaign.
Yeah. Well, I know what they did with it. They gave it to a consultant. So I've actually talked to tons of candidates in my life. And to say that they're universally unhappy with consultants is an understatement. So they get you to try to raise as much money as possible and then spend as much of it as possible in media so they can take their 15% cut. And that's how that game is played. And then people are always wondering, everybody told me I had to get one, but I don't know what just happened. I know I lost, and I know I don't have the money anymore. So that's usually how it goes. How is your approach different? Like, so do you guys get 15%? What do you do that makes people feel like, oh, okay, I'm getting my money's worth. I get it. Good grassroots folks are donating to me. We're using Soul Strategies. And what happens?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we do is we're very transparent with what it is you receive. For instance, our stuff is like on almost a subscription base. So it's month to month. We don't lock anybody in. You don't have to keep us for the duration of the entire campaign. And you don't have to do all campaign activities with us. So for instance, if they're like, I want 4 donation emails and a newsletter going out every week, and I want it sent out to my audience, then they pay for exactly that. If they are saying, I want to knock 10,000 doors in my district, and I want to do a deep canvas, a more persuasive effort that's going to go over the course of a month, where I hit X amount of doors a day in this turf versus this turf, then they'll pay for that specific project.
Okay, well, that actually makes a ton more sense. And then let's talk about the substance. In your estimation, how do you? Let me ask you this way: what's a mistake that you see Democratic candidates doing in the substance of their campaigns that you would counsel them to do differently?
That's a really good question. I would say not knowing how your specific seat that you're running for helps the people in your district. So a lot of times we'll see people running for a more statewide race or a city council race, and they want to make their platform surrounding Medicare for all or something, which is an amazing thing that we want to be done on a federal level, but you're running for city council. So what can you do for the people in your district to help them with their health care in a way that you can actually affect change? So when they feel like they're voting for you, it's an exchange. It's not a bigger idea that may not impact their lives.
Okay, so that again makes a lot of sense. So I often talk about get as close to the voter as you can, know what they care about. So that's why wages is a great way to do that, because how much you make is as close to your self-interest as you could possibly imagine. And it aligns with progressive values. We want you to make more money. We want you to have health care, et cetera. But if you're running for a local seat, you're not going to get to vote on Medicare for all. So, I mean, God bless, you can put it on your website and stuff, but make sure you're telling people how you're going to help them with health care in their own lives. That makes a ton of sense. So in terms of, now let's go super broad. In terms of, let's say, the 22 campaign, how do you think Democrats are doing overall on a big picture level in running their campaigns now?
At first, if you had asked me this 2 or 3 weeks ago, I would have said it's curtains for us. Hang it up, flat screen is over. But we're seeing a shift. We're seeing a shift in this recently because the abortion language has gotten so destructive for Republicans. They're seeing it come back and bite them in the butt completely. And so they're kind of changing their language around and they're backing away from those issues. So them being so trash has helped us with the voters, because it's made people really face who they are, and face their morality in a way that we haven't seen in a long time. Like, it's a hard thing to be able to say you can look at a 10-year-old girl who has been molested or raped by a family member and tell that 10-year-old to carry a child. That makes you really look at yourself internally and determine what type of person you are. And that has been helpful for us now. So I think we're going to do better if the Democrats can come up with stronger language than just we're better than them. We'll have a better shot.
Well, that's exactly where I was going to go next. Do you think Democrats are being aggressive enough in these campaigns?
No, I don't think they are. We've gone to some of the conventions and things like that, and we've heard the party speak and put their platform forward. And a lot of their platform is just, we are not them. And I don't think that's going to move people the way that they want it to. We are hurting as a country. People are having their individual rights trampled on each and every day. Right here in Texas, the Republicans put forth a bill that they were going to repeal the Voting Acts Right of 1964. So this is like very, very personal and big things that can totally change people's lives and change the trajectory of this country for decades to come. So we need the Democrats to speak with that conviction and feel it and let the voters feel it. And I think we'll see better results once they do that.
Yeah. First of all, let me just acknowledge, of course you're right? So the Republicans basically come in and say, we're going to break your arm. And the Democrats are on the campaign saying, we're not going to break your arm. Okay, well, I appreciate it, but I'm not sure that's the best message. It's kind of a low bar. So what do you think is an issue that the Democrats have where they could flip it around and have positive framing? Say, if you vote for us, this is what you're going to get.
I think we're heading in the right direction with some of the things as far as forgiving student loan debt. If we can make some more of those bigger things that feel more, I hate to use the word transactional, but make people feel like their vote is actually going somewhere, then we may have a shot. Maybe doing something on healthcare, maybe doing something on education, funding some of these districts that have been alienated and forgot about, just something big and tangible. I think the voters would like to see that.
I agree. All right, look at this. Amani Wells, Anyoha, Operations Director of Soul Strategies. It looks like we got folks who might be able to help people campaigning. So that's wonderful. Amani, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
No problem. Is the new CNN headed in the right direction? Interesting. I don't think so, but our next guest might think so. So let's have an interesting conversation about it. Colby Hall, old friend, founding editor of Mediaite, joins us now. He wrote a piece about it. Now, Colby, normally I agree with you a lot. Not this one. So I think we're going to have an interesting conversation. So Chris Licht is the new head of CNN, and he got rid of Brian Stelter and Toobin and Harwood, and maybe many more to come. We don't know yet. So tell me why you think he might be headed in the right direction.
Well, I mean, I think the story that piqued your interest, which was really well written, was not necessarily about Licht in the right or wrong direction. It was specifically about Stelter's ouster, right? And it was really about how Chris Licht, it was the first thing that he had done under the new CNN that I thought revealed his strategy, and that was getting away from the navel-gazy kind of media analysis that Brian was really good at. I'm a friend of Brian's. I think Brian did a really good job. But I think what he was trying to do with that move is get away from this like news about news dialogue, which is a really interesting sort of philosophical dynamic. And I think that was an interesting play. I think when you talk about sort of media analysis, it's a tricky thing because Brian was occasionally a little bit of a smug sort of we know better than you, and it kind of undermined the trust that viewers had. And instead, I think the goal is for him to get more on policy and less on personality. Now, I think John Harwood is a great reporter, and his ouster is a sad loss. I'm not necessarily suggesting that what Licht is doing is a good or bad thing. I was basically reporting on it's a thing. So that's my take.
Yeah, I got you. So let's talk about Stelter. So And I have an interesting history with Stelter too. I know him, and we've had agreements, we've had disagreements, right? And I think that he is smug, to be honest. Okay, and I'm honest about it, and that's not going to overly surprise him. But he's smug in both directions, right? So he is with the right wing, but he is also with the left wing, and that's like the thing that's never acknowledged in cable news, Colby. That it's not that they're left wing and they don't like the right. No, they're insiders. They don't like outsiders. So whether it's Trump or it's Bernie, it's MAGA or it's progressives, they're going to be smug either way. So, and I'm not at all convinced that if you get rid of Stelter, you get rid of the smugness. I think they're going to have the same exact smugness, but just lean further to the right.
It's a fair critique. I think that it's too soon to say. I think the point that I was trying to make is that, don't have to get too philosophical, but this sort of like obsession with navel gazing, like honestly, like to take a step back, the intersection, like media and politics work together so hand in glove. And I know that you and I agree with this, and I think what he's trying to do is to get back to news and less of like, let's stare at each other's navels. And it's a tricky thing because Fox News, I believe, is a pernicious outlet that needs to be held accountable. That said, CNN is in the business of covering the news. How do you cover your competitor when they're in the news? It was a point that I made in my column. It's like, if you're constantly talking about the crazy stuff that's going on in Fox News, you're ostensibly parading, or rather you're advertising like, oh, if there's crazy stuff on Fox News, I'm going to tune in to watch that. So, again, I think what Chris Licht is trying to do is to get away from the media talking about the media and talk more about the issues. Will he be able to do that? I think it's a really tough call. I think he wants to have Republicans on his airwaves, not necessarily to promote them, but to, discuss the issues and sort of perhaps confront why they may be wrong. I don't know if that's a tilting to the right, but it's rather sort of fostering a discussion about what's right or wrong. And by the way, when I say Republicans, I don't mean the Fox News MAGA Republicans, like the John Kennedy or Ted Cruz's who are on all the time. But there are reasonable Republicans that are willing to engage in a conversation. And I think that I think there are reasonable Republicans out there that can engage in conversation. And that conversation is probably, if it's possible, is good for the body politic. That's my point.
Yeah, I don't think so. So let's dive into that. I think there's almost no reasonable Republicans, and that when they find a couple that are not extreme, they're accidentally helping Republicans normalize their party, and it is not at all representative. So I could just show that to you in the polling. So, I mean, I'll give you two recent polls. I can give you 1,000 of them, but 61% of Republican voters say that they want Donald Trump to run, even if he's indicted. And
look,
so,
dude, we did a post on that in media. I'm not no lie detected. I agree with that. But isn't sunlight the best disinfectant? Isn't it best to sort of so we live in such a polarized media landscape that do you want to just pretend that we can't have a dialogue, or do you want to call people out on their BS?
No, but they're not going to do that. Come on, I haven't seen them do that once.
The issue. So therein lies the issue. Is you're saying that will never happen. Maybe you're right. Probably you're right. But isn't it admirable to try? Isn't it? No. Come on, dude. You really think that these people aren't necessarily and I'm not talking about, again, the Josh Hawleys. There are bad, evil D-bags out there, and I'm not supporting them at all. But I think the idea is that from a business perspective, CNN needs to try to kind of curry a moderate Republican favor to the degree that it exists. And if it doesn't exist, well, at least they will have tried and failed, and then they can make that point. That's the sort of complicated idea that I was trying to get to.
I got you, Colby. Let me talk about the downside of that. First of all, there's different ways of doing it. So I've had David Duke on the show, and I called him an anti-Semite, a bigot, a racist, etc. You challenge people, no problem. Have him on all day long. I had Curtis Yarwin on the show the other day. He is a quote-unquote right-wing philosopher that J.D. Vance, Blake Masters, Bannon, Carlson are all quoting. He's for a monarchy. And I said, well, isn't that a dictatorship? And we had a real conversation about whether he's in favor of dictators, and it turns out he kind of is. You can watch that conversation. So if you do it that way, then great. I'm not one of these guys. Oh, don't platform them, right? But Chris Licht has taken over, and it's been a couple of months. I haven't seen them challenge one Republican, and it seems like they're not trying to have them on to challenge them. They're having them on to kiss their ass, and so then that's not at all interesting. And they're making it seem like, well, okay, I don't like the corporate Republicans anyway. I mean, I might dislike them more than I dislike Trump. But okay, let's say the corporate Republican at least doesn't want to destroy democracy. Good. Score one for the corporate Republican. Okay? But if you have them on and put them in the most positive light and say this is what the Republican Party is, when you know that literally 2/3, 66% say no, we think Trump won the election, Biden lost it, Biden stole the election, he's been lying about it ever since, he did it with the ghost of Hugo Chavez, then you're giving a misleading impression to your audience that the guy you have on represents the Republican Party, when in reality, 2/3 of the Republican Party is absolutely insane.
Chuck, I hear you. I think your argument is well-founded. I would push back and say that there is a distinction between 61% of Republicans polled and the sort of Republican thought leaders that are in office, right? So, and I think this gets to another point, and that is to say, I think there's clearly a hypocrisy within elected, what you would call corporate Republicans. You think they're full of crap, and I can't, again, no cap. I can't disagree with you. And I think what you've seen a ton of reporting is privately these people are like, I don't know what's going on. It's just politics. We're just going with the flow, which is awful, which is craven. So I agree with you in theory. That said, why give these dudes a pass? If they are saying privately that they think Trump is evil and bad for democracy and is, literally a threat, a legitimate threat to democracy, then why not challenge those private thoughts that they share on TV and then put them there? It's why many of them won't even go on air, because they are being held accountable. And so I think there's something laudable about that. Is it foolish? Is it tilting at windmills? Yeah, probably. Are they platforming them? But I think the point of my column, just to wrap up, is to getting away from the personality and getting more to the policy and the issues. And there are not every Republican that's in Senate or Congress is Ted Cruz and John Kennedy. And those people, those are the guys that need to be held to account, and their feet need to be held. And I think that's what he's trying to do to explore the truth. Will it fail? Maybe. I don't know. But
no.
The Meyer column was like, maybe it's an admirable goal.
Yeah, no, it'll definitely fail, but not because he's trying to do something admirable. So, Colby, in the time that we have, real quick, look, let's just go down a list here and see if let's get us on the record in a fun way on whether CNN will do this. So, for example, that there's two wings of each party, right? There's the establishment Democrats and the progressives, the establishment Republicans and MAGA, right? I've never seen CNN even acknowledge that. And I've never, ever, ever, ever seen them call out establishment Republicans or Democrats. So do you think under Chris Licht that they're going to do that? Because that would be shocking, and I would be definitely in favor of that.
I disagree. I think this new tone that we've heard from Biden has forced that issue. I think we've seen that when this new sort of, Dark Brandon version that's calling out MAGA Republicans, CNN has basically had to cover that and say, like, yes, they're the two. And honestly, it's painted Fox into a corner to try to figure out whether or not are they MAGA Republicans or are they establishment Republicans. And it's put Biden, a moderate Republican, his opponents on their back heels. I think so far that's been somewhat effective. So, not to the degree that you would probably be happy with.
No. Within the Republican circles, yes. Within Democratic circles, almost never. And they don't call the establishment or corporate politicians on either side those terms. They call them moderate, centrist, as if they're lovely, as if they're the ones that are clearly correct. That is not remotely objective.
So on this issue, we can entirely agree that there is an institution of both Democrats. It's something that you and I have talked about a lot, and we both are on the same page. There's institutional party members on both Republicans and Democrats who benefit from the current system and graft. And yes, CNN is part of that institution because they are a big institution.
We're very honest that we're progressives. We call the Young Turks home of progressives, and we support progressive candidates.
There has been this reemergence of political activism, especially among young people.
This weekend was the second Women's March, both across the U.S. and across the world. So these people are not simply marching, they're not simply talking, they're also running for office. And when they do run, they're going to make a difference.
Joe Crowley is congressman from New York. He's very powerful. Why? He raised a lot of money. But there's someone finally challenging him.
We need to have representation that advocates as fiercely for working class people as possible from this seat.
If candidates like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez even get a little bit of media attention outside of what the Young Turks does, they have an excellent chance of winning.
She's gonna win. She's gonna win.
68% reporting.
The majority of Americans want Medicare for all. So I don't care what you and your corporate cronies want. What I care about is what the American people want.
We believe in total change. Everything runs on donor money. And that is what we will fight, and that is exactly why they don't like us.
We're having fun. It's election night.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has defeated Joe Crowley.
Here we go again.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Down goes Crowley. Down goes Crowley.
Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and we have a gigantic, awesome show ahead for you, including an interview today with Jason Miles, who is the co-host of the This Is Revolution podcast. I wanted to have him come on because of his personal experiences dealing with various methods to help with the drug addiction epidemic that we're seeing in the country. He has worked in the area of harm reduction, and I think that perspective is incredibly invaluable. So we'll have him on the show in the first hour to discuss his personal experiences and his thoughts on what we can do as members of the left to help get the country out of the situation it's currently grappling with. The opioid epidemic, of course, continues. Now we have around 100,000 people dying of drug overdoses per year. So it's an important topic, and I really want to explore it more. We will be doing that in the first hour. Later in the show, we're also going to have John Iadarola join us for a fun second half, and we'll discuss some lighter stories for sure, fun stories. I'm sure John will have some thoughts on what's going on in the world of fantasy content, including House of the Dragons, because that show, I was a little worried it was going to suck, but I watched it and I'm already 3 episodes in. Love it. Couldn't recommend it more. So we'll talk about that and more in the second half of the show. But before we get started, I wanted to encourage you guys to like and share the stream. I think it's an easy way to help support the show and support the message. And you should also become a member, because in the members only bonus episode today, my husband, who was a former professional baseball player, will be joining us to talk about the fact that the minor league has now joined the MLB union, which is long overdue. This is really, really good news. And so he's going to come on to talk about his personal experiences in the minor leagues and what it was like, because I don't think a lot of people understand, even in the minor leagues, you don't get paid much and the conditions aren't so great. And so unionizing will help at least start to address some of those issues. Speaking of labor, by the way, we're going to begin with a story to update you on the rail strike. So let's get right to it.
We're not asking for the world here. We're asking for a few days off a month to spend with our family instead of living on a train. We spend 240 to 260 hours a month sitting on these trains or sitting at the hotel rooms away from our families.
I love how shocked and surprised conservative hosts are when they hear from workers who are about to strike because they don't have great working conditions, but more importantly, they don't get paid time off. And in this case, they were specifically speaking to a rail worker, and there's good reason for having this discussion. We got to keep in mind that rail workers are planning on striking as soon as Friday of this week. And I'll tell you why in just a moment. But just to break down that video even further, the whole point of that conversation was to bring up the fact that the railroad workers are not willing to accept what the terms of the latest negotiation with their employers have been. There are 12 major railroad companies that are about to lose workers to a strike later this week because they're unwilling to change the fact that they aren't giving these workers enough time off to deal with illnesses, family emergencies. I'm going to give you the details to all of that in just a moment, but I do think it's important to watch the rest of that Newsmax video. So let's take a look.
David, we did reach out to the Association of American Railroads, and they say that workers get sick days and paid time off.
Whoever told you we get our sick days is manipulating the data. We get paid time off that we earned the previous year before. Before the new policy came about, we were allowed to take 5 days off and 2 weekend days off a month. Now we could take virtually 1 day unpaid off a month And then the only other time we could take off is our paid time that we had to earn the previous year.
Yeah, that does seem ridiculous. They would never let airline pilots do that. Is that
Exactly.
is that issue number one for members of the unions?
100% is number one.
So here's an update on what's currently happening with the railroad workers, their employers, and where the current negotiations are at. As we've shared on the show before, railroad workers have been threatening to strike, and the White House actually intervened to prevent that strike from happening. And the reason why the Biden administration would want to intervene is because, of course, railroad workers striking would be a massive disruption to the economy. And that kind of disruption, especially so close to the midterms, would be a disaster for the Democrats since they're in charge right now. Now, as I mentioned, the railroad workers are potentially going to strike later this week unless Congress gets involved and basically prevents them from doing it. But before I give you the details to that, let me give you the details on the terms of the negotiation that the railroad workers have rejected. So the negotiations did lead to a proposed pay increase, which is pretty significant, right? Now, that's not enough, though, because these are individuals who are working incredibly long hours. Oftentimes, they don't see their own family members for weeks and weeks and weeks. And so they want to be able to spend more time with their families, which is understandable. They want time off in case they are sick. And unfortunately, right now, they only get 1 day in some of these railroad companies, right? The workers get maybe 1 day off per week for, let's say, an emergency or an illness. And clearly that's not enough, right? And so if the strike happens, as I mentioned, it could have major ramifications for the economy. The Biden administration has been pretty aggressive in trying to do something about inflation. And as recent reports indicate, inflation is still very much a problem. I think that there are multiple factors that are leading to inflation in different sectors of the economy. We've talked about that before. But I do want to mention that if a negotiation has not been reached by Friday, they will strike. After that, those unions can legally strike, a move that could drive transportation costs higher, stall commutes and gum up shipments of coal, chemicals, cars, and grain, and cost $2 billion a day by one estimate. Okay, so again, those are the ramifications for the economy, which this is where workers' power really lies, when they're able to bring companies to their knees by doing a strike like this. Now, how much will this have a toll on the economy? Well, depending on how you want to measure it, the railroads at some point touch between about a third to about 45% of all freight in the U.S. at some point or another. Okay, so let's pause for a second. That's a quote from Jason Miller, who's a professor over at Michigan State University. If you know that the nation's economy literally relies on these workers, there are as many as 100,000 rail workers involved here, right? Just give them more time off. They're not, as far as I understand it, by the way, they're not even asking for more paid time off per month to deal with family emergencies or sicknesses. They just want more unpaid time off, meaning workers have been retaliated against if they need to take more time off, unpaid, which is crazy. Now, the White House has already gotten involved, as I mentioned earlier. The White House is reportedly speaking with ocean shipping, truck, and air freight providers to explore ways to keep goods flowing, but filling a railroad network-sized gap in the economy could be a tough task. And this is where the $2 billion number comes in. It could cost as much as $2 billion a day just to do that. And that's according to the Association of American Railroads. It's an industry group. And while I do think that it will be costly for the economy, you should also be a little dubious of that $2 billion a day number, because this is essentially the industry trying to encourage Congress to step in and essentially prevent the strikers from being able to strike. And there is precedent for that. Now, the association estimated that it would take 467,000 long haul trucks daily to haul what the railroads do. There simply aren't enough trucks or truck drivers to handle that volume, it said in the report. And that I do believe. As we know, there was already an issue with a shortage of truck drivers. And so the idea that truckers can fill that gap left behind by striking railroad workers is insane. And I would probably venture to say that some of the truckers probably wouldn't want to, go against the striking workers and fill the so-called gaps. Now, again, that responsibility to fill the gaps would fall on the truckers. Now, why haven't the railroad companies been able to reach this deal? Again, the main issue was leave, and they've already agreed on the percentage increase in pay. So in July, President Joe Biden intervened to avert a strike, naming a panel of arbitrators to mediate the contract disputes. The panel last month issued a 124-page report recommending a 24% pay increase, sounds pretty good, and bonuses through 2024, along with back pay through much of 2020. Now, that satisfied the railroads and has tentatively been good enough for 10 out of the 12 labor unions. But the two labor unions that have decided, no, we're going to reject this, are specifically calling on more time off, okay? So the remaining holdouts, the Brother of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, and the International Association of Steel, Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Workers account for well above half the rail labor force. They say they want any agreement to address what they say are strict attendance, sick, and time off policies. That's all it takes at this point. Okay, that is literally all it takes to avoid a strike. And while it appears that the rhetoric of the employers here has softened a little bit because they want to prevent the strike from happening, fact of the matter is, rather than giving these workers what they're calling for, which is so incredibly reasonable, they've decided, no, let's really push out some aggressive messaging to get Congress. Sorry, guys. I don't know what happened with my mic. God damn it. Okay, you know what? Let's take a break because I don't know what you guys heard. I don't know what you didn't hear. Sorry for the tech issues. We'll be right back.
Indisputable has been named the fastest growing news TV show in the United States of America, compared to all shows on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and roughly 30 others. What do we do on this show? We tell the truth. You know why we tell the truth? Because the truth is simply indisputable. Donald Trump radicalized citizens. He's the chief terrorist. Republicans still want you to think that critical race theory is the greatest evil that can happen in K through 12 education. It's not even taught. I guarantee you this, David. If he would have taken a knee during the national anthem to bring awareness to the need for more money for cancer research in America, he would not have had that response. It was the fact that he took a knee for black folk and brown folk. You rather pick the voters because you're scared of the voters picking the politicians. It frightens you. But we coming. When you are in a privileged position, equality looks like oppression to you. The Karenicity runs deep in this one. We provide a mirror for reflection and a mirror for correction.
So what if I have 35? Don't hit me. Don't touch me. Don't touch me.
So let's put up the graphic of this Karen in peak performance. Boom. They want anarchy so they can start creating their own rules.
Can you share with me some examples?
When they were running around during the terrorist attack on January 6th saying, hang Mike Pence. So those are the people I'm talking about. That's a problem, correct? You work for Mike Pence, stand up for the guy. Do not allow the ideology of politics to evaporate the humanity that still exists inside of you. They don't stop, I don't stop. Racism won't stop, I won't stop. Systemic bias won't stop, so I won't stop. People still need health care, so I won't stop. People still need criminal justice systems reformed in this country, so I won't stop. And you won't stop either.
Hey guys, welcome back. Sorry about the tech issues, but I wanted to wrap up the story about the rail workers and their potential strike at the end of the week, I should say. So basically, 3 out of the 12 unions representing these workers have already voted in favor of doing this strike by the end of the week. Again, the only thing that the employers need to do is agree to provide more time off for these workers so they can deal with life, something that we all have to deal with, right? So I think it's totally reasonable. And so I should note that the 2 remaining holdouts when it comes to the negotiations so far were the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen and the International Association of Sheet Metal, Air, Rail, and Transportation Workers. They account for well above half of the rail labor force. They say they want any agreement to address what they say are strict attendance, sick, and time off policies. And again, incredibly reasonable. And instead of just providing this one final demand to the workers, who, by the way, without those workers, economy goes to crap. Without those workers, no revenue, okay, for the employers here. All they need to do is the bare minimum. They've already agreed to the pay increase of 24%. They've already agreed to back pay. Just give them the time off that they need. And instead of doing that so far, by the way, we're hearing that they're hoping that Congress will intervene and essentially prevent these workers from striking. They're trying to force congressional intervention. Analysts over at JP Morgan are telling investors, now's a great time to invest in railroad companies because there's no way Congress won't intervene. And it gives you a sense of what Congress is really meant for in neoliberal politics. In neoliberalism, the government isn't there to protect you, the worker. The government is there to protect corporate interests. And that's what we see play out over and over again. And while the Biden administration really wants to position itself as, a pro-labor administration, and to be sure, to be fair, Biden and his NLRB have certainly been better than administrations in recent decades, which isn't saying much, it's a low bar. I would have liked to see the Biden administration actually apply the pressure to the railroad companies to ensure that these workers get the time off that they need. Okay, that's what's important to do here. And as I mentioned earlier, there is precedent for Congress stepping in. So the June 1992 railroad strike lasted for 2 days before Congress passed a bill banning strikes and lockouts. That was signed by George H.W. Bush at the time. And then you have lawmakers who have used the Railway Labor Act of 1926 to intervene at least 11 times since 1963. So again, it's not unprecedented for Congress to get involved, but I would really like to see Democrats put their money where their mouth is. They love to campaign on supporting the workers and doing right by them. How about you actually put those words into action, and instead of intervening to prevent the strike from happening, you apply pressure to the employers to agree to this one final thing, which I know this is like the billionth time I've said it, is incredibly reasonable. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to have an excellent interview. I'm really looking forward to it. Jason Miles, co-host of the This Is Revolution podcast, will be joining us to talk about the opioid epidemic and what we can do in terms of harm production, how we can rethink, battling this devastating problem that we're seeing all across the country. Don't miss it. We'll be right back.
You know what the progressive movement needs? It needs a little energy, a little pizzazz, maybe a little caffeine. Oh, coffee. But what if it was Too Strong Coffee? Yes, new TooStrongCoffee.com/TYT. Look, this helps progressive causes. It's also organic and fair trade, so you've got peace of mind that it was done right. And it happens to taste great. So check it out right now at TooStrongCoffee.com/TYT.
That 300 million is a pretty good number, Well, that's the size of the U.S. population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world.
We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking, one day.
We looked at you like, are you nuts?
Young Turks has just passed another milestone.
20 billion views.
Damn. All right, lots of comments. You guys are the best.
I'm gonna read a few comments from our members.
Mr. Methuselah says on YouTube, super chat, thanks for all the important work you do for TYT for the movement.
Do you know who had the first super chat when I got back from vacation? You won't be surprised to find out. Rob Shively. What do you know? Rob says, rejoice, for Dragon Daddy has returned.
This question sent to us by Izzy Sanchez Jr. Is it me or is Meghan McCain talking as fast as Ben Shapiro? Is that the way the right tries to look smart and intellectual? Well, yes.
Michael Nathan writes it on Twitter. Did Anna choose Cenk's outfit today? I'm sure it wasn't Cenk himself. Man Bun Jenkins Skinny Jeans says, so now Anna has pointed out, okay, that's his handle.
T. Joyce 1971 saying Donald Trump is good at pulling out of things, NAFTA, the Iran deal, NATO. It's just too bad Fred Trump didn't.
All right, let me do a little quick plug here. It's not even a plug, I'm bragging, okay? I'm bragging, watch me. We have a channel on YouTube, a whole channel devoted just to the Young Turks. It's badass, right? Wow, man.
I can see the voice.
You guys are rock stars.
Unbelievable. Senator Sanders, welcome to Rebel Headquarters. Man, you guys are amazing. We gave you what you wanted. Okay. Speaking of shirts.
I have a surprise.
You reached a lot of people. You are the Young Turks. And we have spread that progressive message wide and far. Let's keep it going.
Here's what we do. We go beyond the headline. We are willing to engage in transparent conversations with those who do not think like me. We also make sure that you know what's happening not only nationally, but in your local area. Make sure you tune in to Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Ritchie, Monday through Friday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Time.
Cool news, shoptyt.com.
Welcome back to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and we have a fantastic guest and an important conversation up next. Joining us now is the host of the This Is Revolution podcast, Jason Miles. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This is cool.
So Jason, I've been meaning to talk to you about your experience with safe injection sites, with harm reduction policies, because clearly the way this country has dealt with the opioid epidemic, with people who are addicted to drugs, the fact that we've decided to criminalize them for so long has been so destructive. And we're starting to see a different approach in some parts of the country, California being one of them, where the focus has kind of shifted toward the idea of harm reduction instead of criminalization and prosecution. And you had called into the Majority Report back in February, and you just kind of wanted to share your perspective. I thought what you had to say was really interesting, and I wanted to kind of make space for you to elaborate on your thoughts a little more today. So first, let me just kind of set this up, give the audience some context. What have your experiences been in this space, in this area, dealing with drug addiction?
I myself have never touched drugs or drank, but drug addiction is pretty deep in my family as far as growing up with an addict. And I've faced homelessness. I actually was homeless for a while. And then kind of the only thing that saved me from it was recently moving down here to Mexico, where I live now. It's the only place I could afford. And I lived and worked with the unhoused for quite some time in what would be known as a wet facility, or a facility where people actually can use drugs. You're not going to lose your housing for drug use. And I had to work hand in hand with the position that I had, actually with a company, an organization called HEPAC. I shouldn't say a company, it's an organization that actually hands out needles. And I think when people think about safe injection sites, or when they think about even wet facilities like the one I was in, it always becomes it's either a I don't want it next to me kind of issue, or and that turns into I don't want it at all, sadly, or we need to have more of these things, but silently I don't want it next to me. Because one of the things is, and I can give Oakland as a perfect example, East Oakland. If you're familiar with the Oakland Raiders, who are now in Las Vegas, and the Golden State Warriors, who are now in San Francisco, they vacated a very large facility that now only the Oakland A's have. And you probably have seen, I know you guys do a sports show, the attendance is extremely low. Sometimes there's less people there that are there for a high school football game. And a lot of that has to do with the deterioration that happened around that area, especially when those teams left, and the little bits of business that were there left as well. So there were hotels there because it's actually right next to the airport. It's kind of a perfect location for a sports team. You have freeway access, literally exits right into the parking lot. You have public transportation access. We have a subway system in the Bay Area called BART, Bay Area Rapid Transit, that lets you off right at the stadium. But we had a Walmart leave, and I don't know too many people that know what it's like when a Walmart actually vacates an area. It actually leaves a really large hole, and there's been a fight around who's going to use that building between the county and the city. And you create this environment where you have a lot of people that are also losing housing that got ramped up during COVID. So these hotels that were left there, and what I think is kind of a great strategy, first step strategy in handling our homeless problem, is single room occupancy, especially with these, or SROs, you might hear people say that. And so we had a lot of emergency facilities that were started up instantly, but some hotels didn't buy in; they just didn't want it. And what then happened around those areas, because you had such a large influx of homeless people, is kind of, and this wasn't part of the plan, of course, you build almost a hell zone in this area because it's an anything goes space. There's drug use, there's prostitution, there's tons of violence. And it's all going to happen in this space.
Okay, let me pause you for 1 second.
Sure.
Because you're touching on something, obviously it's uncomfortable to talk about, right? Because on one hand, you want to house people, you want to get them off the streets. Like, to me, that's the number one priority, because if they're on the streets, it's dangerous. I mean, if you look at the homicides in Los Angeles, for instance, the individuals who are overwhelmingly overrepresented in the homicide statistics are the unhoused. So you want to get them in housing, but there is an issue with some of these public housing solutions, even if it's temporary housing, if they have the very strict rules on drug use, for instance. Well, then you're going to deny people a roof over their heads, and it seems incredibly cruel. But I feel like there's also some downsides of not having any rules, and you're kind of touching on that right now. And it's really hard to hear it. But the thing that people forget about, because I used to be 100% against any rules. It's like, just get people housed. But a woman actually reached out to me who used to be unhoused because she left her abusive husband with her kids. And she didn't want to be in an environment where she and her kids had to deal with some of the things that you're describing right now. It's a complicated and nuanced issue, but I wanted you to continue. Yeah.
Sure. I have a few anecdotes, and I hope we have time for them. I'll try to be brief.
Sure.
And if we can come back, I can talk more about the idea of accidentally creating a hell zone, because I think none of us want that, right?
Right.
And one of the things that I tried to do in my position in the facility was reimagine the way we have these facilities. And it's very hard. So first of all, what I wanted to do was make it kind of an oasis. So I called all of the people that I knew from the industries that I've been in and friends that I've met over the years. And I also had to get as many people on board working there as well, because you're trying to reimagine how we imagine housing. And what it ends up becoming is warehousing. And I think a lot of people don't want to see it that way because they want to assume that once you throw someone in a house, they're going to be grateful. So that also flattens the way we see homelessness and the people that are unhoused. And my big issue with that is, if you really want to combat this, you have to accept the fact that not everybody's going to be the perfect homeless person. There's going to be real criminals in here. There's going to be pederasts in here. There's going to be rapists and murderers in there. Actually, my managers of the facility were literally murderers that had turned their lives around. So you have to understand that the population that you're dealing with isn't all kind of idealistic, right? And it's going to get ugly, some of the things that you're going to see. And I want to give a quick anecdote. There was a woman that came in with her boyfriend, and at some point, the boyfriend became abusive. Now, we don't know about anyone's spousal abuse problems. There is no knocks on doors and asking, how's the relationship going? And a lot of services weren't provided. People came to me all the time and asked for drug treatment service. Like, hey, can we have an AA meeting? And there's certain rules about having AA meetings. And another thing people have to understand is most of these things are run by nonprofits. So the state doesn't want to pay benefits to anybody. So they'll throw some money out to a nonprofit. The nonprofit is going to try to keep everything as lean as possible. So all the programs that we instituted, even down to a school program that was because we had a woman in the facility that was a retired teacher, and all these kids that were in there, and wonderful people donated materials. We were able to have school for kids even during the pandemic. But again, this all comes from trying to reimagine this. And this isn't coming top down. It's not like Gavin Newsom is giving us orders, or the mayor is giving us orders, or city council's giving us orders. This is people wanting to create a better environment. But back to this situation, I'll try to be brief and tell me to shut up if I'm running out of time. So she has issues with this abusive boyfriend, and he hits her, and we get a call. Hey, you guys got to come over here, Jay. This woman just got hit. Before the call came, we were stopping another guy from fighting another cat. It happens, right? There's one washing machine between 400 people. There's going to be some fights, right? So run over, talk to the guy, talk to the woman. She's upset, obviously. I have to take the man out of the facility. I said, hey, man, you got to go. He says, are you going to call the cops? I said, are you going to leave? He goes, yes. He leaves, right? So I go to the young lady, and we talk. She's very upset. I asked her if she wanted to go into a different room for the night. She said, yes, please. And I walk her to another room for the gentleman. He's already out of the facility. And I heard her break down and cry in a way I've never heard anyone break down and cry before. And just thinking about it right now is actually making me a little bit emotional. And so she wanted to go back to her room. She's like, thank you for the night. I was like, you can stay there. No, I'll go back to my room. And unbeknownst to us, because hotels are not really set up for surveillance like you would think, it's more for surveillance of a parking lot. It's not for rooms, or it's where privacy comes into play. He was sneaking through a fence, and he kept sneaking back in. And we had to open doors for people, right? They didn't have their own key. And opening the door, I saw him in there. And I took her aside privately, and I was like, hey, is he back? And she lied to me. She goes, no, not at all. Why would you think that? I was like, because I opened the door for you and I saw him. But she had asked me to open the door. That was her way of trying to warn me without warning me, right? So he didn't. Eventually, he had attacked her again, and eventually we had to call the police.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you. I have so many questions for you.
Okay.
So I think the point you made about the lack of government involvement is a really important one, because I see the same problem when it comes to building housing, right? Where I would much rather have the government be in charge of building the housing, meaning the government hires government workers, pays them really well, gives them benefits. And instead of hiring a third party, instead of hiring a private contractor to build housing so they can pad their pockets by inflating the cost of the building materials or whatever, I just think it would be much better to have the government facilitate all of that. What I'm noticing, just based on the anecdote you're sharing and your personal experiences, is that you have a community coming together trying to do their best. You have a nonprofit organization trying to do its best. But we're talking about people who have all sorts of, problems, issues, whatever you want to call it. They need help. It goes beyond just putting a roof over their head, right? It could be a drug addiction. It could be a domestic violence issue. Was there anyone within, your team working there who had some expertise on these issues, or was it just ordinary people coming together doing their best?
I'll be honest. No one wants that job. So you're dealing with people that some people stay. There's maybe from when I was there, I left because of a COVID outbreak, and it was the second one. And I had a bit of a blow up, and as you can imagine, trying to reimagine the way that nonprofits usually do things, they don't like that, right? So I was a bit of a thorn in the side, and then I left. And there's only about maybe 3 people that are still there from when I was there. And then that extra facility actually went back to being a private hotel. And some people moved throughout the company to continue to help people get housing. And because that's our main goal, right? The main goal of this organization actually was to put people into permanent housing. But the problem was that we were just kind of in a warehousing facility where we couldn't speak to the issues that we were dealing with, especially when it came to violence, because the county didn't want to hear about it, and the nonprofit couldn't have the county hearing about it because that would be detrimental to the program. And the reason why I bring this up, and I want to say this on air, is because not to shut these things down. We have to understand that these are the problems that are going to happen if we want to reimagine what criminal justice looks like. I look at a person like Chesa Boudin, who I got to know kind of peripherally working with Shahid Buttar in San Francisco, trying to reimagine the justice system, reimagine the district attorney's office, and not incarcerate quality of life crimes that leads people down this path. I'll try to be as brief. Again, I know we have a short time. One of my coworkers, we got a new guy that was one of these dudes that had committed a major felony, but he was totally reformed and was working in the nonprofit sector. And this was like he had 2 jobs in the nonprofit sector. And part of our job was to hand out food to people at lunch and dinner time, right? So we're doing our food handout. And there was a unit where there was 2 women that had 3 children between the 2 of them in it. And one day, and their mom was there as well. One of their moms was there in the facility. So it was kind of a generational hangout in one of the rooms as we're handing out dinner. And the guy I'm working with looks and sees what will be the grandma. It's like, "Hey, girl," and just talks to her real casually. And he looks at me and goes, "I got to talk to you." And we go into our lobby, the communal lobby where everybody can come talk to us. And he goes, "The daughter, I knew when she was 3. And when I was doing dope and committing robberies, I was doing it with her mom and her father. And she was in the car with us. That girl had no chance. She had 2 children that were in the facility. She had more children out in the world. One was a 12-year-old that had stopped going to school at 2nd grade. And one was 6. We're teaching both how to read at around the same time with the schooling. And when you understand that's not everybody is on the same. What's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely no one. Right, exactly. I mean, it's not an even playing field for everyone from the beginning, right? People
It's infuriating. It was infuriating for me because before I knew that, I would have to deal with her and deal with and I didn't mind dealing with the kids to a certain extent. I'm a dad of 4, but it would make me mad at the way she dealt with things. But finding out the story, the backstory, it's a reminder. And what I always say is if homelessness doesn't frustrate you, you're not close enough to it. But you should always be walking a frustrating line of, man, I hate this, but you have to have a certain level of understanding, because a lot of times we otherize people. Once you're homeless, once you're mentally ill, then you're other.
Yeah, no, I think you're right about that. So final question for you. From your experiences, obviously you noticed that there were some flaws, right? So if you had all the resources and you could create a supportive system that's actually way better, it's reimagined, it's kind, humane, it does more than just put a roof over people's heads. I mean, housing's important, but clearly the homelessness issue it's so much more nuanced than that, because people come from so many different stories, so many different issues, whether it be an abusive relationship or drug addiction. So what would you want to see in an ideal program or system to give folks the help they need to get their lives back on track?
First and foremost, I want it to be somewhere where people felt comfortable in the sense of they weren't on the cusp of constantly losing something for not following a certain rule or having the right paperwork. Number 2, I'd want not just counselors in the facility, but the counselors also have outreach help as well, because we don't want to burn people out constantly. I would want there to be some sort of communal staff in the sense of people can learn how to cook, not just for themselves, but for everybody. So we do things communally. Education, that's also communal. One of the greatest things that we did was when we got to have the school, it wasn't we brought outside teachers, it was the people that taught, that had lost their home for whatever reason, got to teach again. And there was something about that vibe that whenever that people would see, because I always did these things in the space where people could see. When we hit the personal training, the physical therapy, people had injuries for 20 years and they couldn't move arms and legs, and they were finally able to get range of motion again. And, even the yoga was kind of one of those things where, like, I never thought I'd be doing yoga. So can we create a place that's kind of like a resort and change the way we view this, instead of looking at it as warehousing a problem of ne'er-do-wells? If you want drug counseling, here it is for you. But definitely we have needles for you if you need, and sharps. You know what the biggest problem we had? We lost so many janitors for. There was no place for people to throw away needles. And we had a lot of people had HIV and hepatitis. And the maintenance staff was getting needles stuck into their shoes.
Man, this country is in such a massive crisis. And, I don't think, first of all, thank you for coming on and sharing your experiences. Because, I think it's really easy for people to otherize and to just want to throw people away or warehouse them, but it doesn't solve the problem. Right. It's more than just putting a roof over people's heads. And I think that you raise a lot of interesting issues. In fact, hopefully we can continue the conversation at a later date. In fact, on October 23rd, you and I are going to be doing a live show with Ben Burgess in Los Angeles. So get your tickets if you're interested. If you're in LA or near LA, you should come see the live show. Again, it's on October 23rd, which is on a Sunday. And I could talk about this with you for the entirety of the show, but unfortunately we're out of time. And everyone check out the This Is Revolution podcast. It's hosted by Jason Miles, and it's fantastic. Jason, thank you for being generous with your time and coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we're gonna take a brief break, and when we come back, we'll talk about how Democratic members of Congress are skirting the opportunity to pass a ban on trades of individual stocks. I love that story. Don't miss it. We'll be right back. we could have continued with that conversation. We have so much more to get to in the rundown, but check out Jason Miles and the This Is Revolution podcast. I think he has really interesting perspectives, especially as someone who was once homeless himself and has experienced this. I wanted to talk a little more about the opioid epidemic, but I promise you we'll definitely go back to that topic at a later time. Wanted to read some member comments, starting with Biden Flavor Corn Pop, who says, finally, we get to see this hot husband Anna keeps referencing. Yes. OJam writes in and says, conservatives seem to have a really hard time empathizing with other people's circumstances. They kind of just assume people demanding better conditions are just complainers who aren't working hard enough. Yeah, when it comes to the rail workers, I mean, they're away from their families for weeks at a time. I couldn't do that. You know, I don't have kids, but I wouldn't want to be away from my husband and my dog and my parents for weeks at a time. That's crazy. Theater Goddess, aka Verbose Dragon, writes in and says, when I was younger, my dad traveled for work and had on-call weekends. It was tough because he was away a lot and could get pulled away sometimes. But when he was off work, he was able to be there for and with us. When I babysat for kids whose fathers worked for the railroads, he was never able to fully relax because he was always on call. It was really bad for the kids. Theater Goddess, I mean, it's almost as if you're a rail worker yourself. Like this is literally what they're saying. They're like, listen, we get sick sometimes. We need to be able to call in sick without retaliation, you know? So I hope they get what they want because they deserve it. They deserve a basic necessity, which is time off. Strategic Diversity Dragon says, as a European, I am shocked at Newsmax. Never thought it possible that workers would not even get paid sick leave. We have unlimited paid sick leave. Strategic Diversity Dragon, I'm curious where in Europe you're living. So right back in. Now then Zen says, when I have tech failures, I beat my computer also. To be fair to me, I punched the desk out of frustration. But anyway, you know what they say, spare the rod, spoil the computer. All right, we've got 30 seconds left. We've got Pop Town Ruler 08 who says, Anna is an amazing host. I love Wednesdays when she's the first hour is solo. Thank you for that support. And Neglectic writes in and says, it's more likely than Anna or John would beat Jank at fantasy football than Democrats actually standing behind rail workers. Not that I would do any better at fantasy football. Fantasy football is so incredibly dorky. Like, it's the dorkiest sounding thing ever. Let's get back to the show. I love hearing from our members. Trista wrote in from our member section to say that she loves live interviews on the show. So I promise that we'll do more of it, especially these topical issues that have such a huge impact on communities. So thank you for that comment. Thank you for being a member. We love and support you guys, and we couldn't do what we do without you. All right, well, let's get to our next story.
Nancy Pelosi has had months and months and months to bring this thing to the floor. September 30th, that's when you all go on recess. You got a little over 2 weeks. Is there any chance Speaker Pelosi brings this thing to a vote? You can't blame Republicans on this one.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but Stephanie Ruhle is speaking truth. And that was a conversation specifically about legislation that is meant to ban members of Congress from trading individual stocks. And this is an issue that is near and dear to my heart because while we certainly do talk a lot about how money in politics corrupts our politicians and makes them even more disconnected from the constituents they were elected to serve, the issue with them also profiting off of the very companies that they should be regulating is a huge issue that we need to address. And there's been a lot of backlash toward reports that members of Congress have been trading individual stocks that they have been weighing in on legislatively. So there are conflicts of interest there. And I also think that there is some insider trading going on. So there's been backlash in regard to that as well. Now, Stephanie Ruhle was speaking to a Democratic representative, a congresswoman by the name of Abigail Spanberger. And I think it's important to hear what she has to say in response to the question and statement from Ruhle. Hey, you guys are in charge. You guys going to do something about this? You can't blame Republicans. Here's what Abigail Spanberger had to say.
If the speaker wanted to bring it for a vote this week or this month, she certainly could. And so we've seen kind of stall tactics along the way. There was going to be a committee hearing. There was going to be additional legislation introduced. We haven't seen that. The House Administration Committee was going to take action. We haven't seen that. It's very straightforward. There are many industries, many places, many journalists who, in fact, can't buy or sell individual stocks because of the potential conflict of interest, depending upon the subject matter that they cover.
Yeah, and let me be clear. It's not a potential conflict of interest. It is a conflict of interest. As a legislator, it is your job to ensure that corporations aren't being abusive to their workers. You're supposed to keep your constituents, the American people, safe from exploitative behaviors from corporations. Like, that's part of the job. And it's really difficult to do that when the reason why these employers, the reason why these companies and corporations are as abusive as they are to their employers is because they're always looking to cut costs associated with labor to do what? Maximize profits. And they maximize the profits for their shareholders. They literally have a fiduciary responsibility to do just that. And so if you have members of Congress invested in individual stocks, they're going to want to protect that profit motive. They're going to want to protect an employer's ability to maximize profits. It is a massive conflict of interest. And let me be clear about something else. Look, I would like to see the House pass legislation that would ban members of Congress, their spouses, and their staffers from trading individual stocks. Now, do I think it's going to happen? No, I don't think it's going to happen. Maybe the House will pass something. There's a Senate version of the bill in the works as we speak. But does anyone really think that there's any possibility that this kind of legislation would pass in the Senate, considering the filibuster? So unless we do something about that legislative filibuster that requires 60 senators to vote in favor of something in order for it to pass, we're never going to get legislation like this through Congress, period. That is the reality of the situation. So when you see Democratic politicians boast about how they're introducing this legislation, it's really important to understand that it's really nothing more than a little PR stunt. Because you got to focus on the first order of business. And the first order of business is, okay, what are the obstacles in the way when it comes to attempting to pass this legislation? So I want to go to Nancy Pelosi now, because if you can recall, Nancy Pelosi, in the very beginning of this whole debate, was very dismissive of the idea that members of Congress should be banned from trading individual stocks. In fact, she was asked about it during a press conference, and here's how she handled it.
Insider just completed a 5-month investigation finding that 49 members of Congress and 182 senior congressional staffers have violated the Stock Act, the insider trading law. I'm wondering if you have any reaction to that, and secondly, should members of Congress and their spouses be banned from trading individual stocks while serving in Congress?
No, I don't know to the second one. We have a responsibility to report in the stock. On the stock, but I'm not familiar with that 5-month review, but if people aren't reporting, they should be. Because this is a free market and we're a free market economy, they should be able to participate in that.
Yeah, we're a free market economy, so we should be able to participate in massive conflicts of interest by personally investing in individual stocks. That would, of course, corrupt us and lead us to pursue our own personal financial, priorities over the best interests of the people who elected us into office. So, that was an abysmal, terrible response. But then she changed, right? All of a sudden, her rhetoric softened when it came to this issue. And she said that she was far more open to the idea of passing such legislation in the House, although that legislation hasn't been introduced, it hasn't been debated, it hasn't been voted on. What gives? Well, Pelosi was asked about that today, and here's what she had to say about it.
Just because somebody introduces a bill doesn't mean it becomes the law of the land. There's been a discussion about it, and just recently, this morning, actually, the committee, we've been going back and forth, and they were refining things and talking to members about what they think will work, and we believe we have a product that we can bring to the floor this month.
Okay. So a lot of excuses there, but her rhetoric has softened on the issue. And I would, this is my opinion, I would venture to say that the reason why her rhetoric has softened is because A, she got a lot of backlash after she said, it's the free market, we should be able to participate. And B, she knows that this is not ever going to pass unless something happens with the legislative filibuster in the Senate. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Senate is working on its own version of this legislation, which is unlikely to pass because there's no way 60 senators would vote in favor of it. But to further prove my point that Nancy Pelosi isn't really serious about wanting to pass this kind of legislation, she called on Representative Lofgren, of course, another Democrat, to essentially reconcile the Senate version of the bill and the House version of the bill. And if you look at the stock activity of Lofgren and her husband, conflicts of interest. Not the person that I would put in charge in making sure that, we reconcile both versions of the bill and get something passed. And it's because I don't think they're serious about getting anything passed. Now, I do want to get into an investigation, a good investigation actually, done by the New York Times on this issue. And I love this kind of data because it just shows you how corrupt Congress has become. And again, it goes beyond money in politics. It goes beyond campaign donors. You also have to focus on their own personal financial interests, right? So let's take a look at the first graphic here because they looked at stock trades between 2019 and 2021. And they found that from 2019 to 2021, 183 current senators or representatives reported a trade of a stock or another financial asset by themselves or an immediate family member, meaning their spouse or their dependent children, right? Or not dependent children, just their children who live with them. It doesn't even have to be someone they cite as a dependent. But if you break it down further, the New York Times found that more than half of those members of Congress sat on congressional committees that potentially gave them insight into the companies whose shares they reported buying or selling. And again, this is analysis by the New York Times. So that's 97, okay? Almost 100 current senators or representatives who have reported trades of individual stocks, either by themselves or members of their immediate family, that intersected with the work that they do in the committees that they serve. So going back to Abigail Spanberger and it might give the appearance of a conflict of interest. No, it is a conflict of interest. It's a massive conflict of interest. And I want to provide specific examples of that, okay? So over the 3-year period that the New York Times looked at, more than 3,700 trades reported by lawmakers from both parties posed potential conflicts between their public responsibilities and private finances. So let's go ahead and look at their trades. Let's look at their trades, okay? And by the way, this is a bipartisan issue, okay? This is not a let's attack Democrats, let's attack Republicans. It's a let's attack all of them because they're all doing it kind of situation, okay? So Representative Alan Lowenthal's wife disclosed that she had sold Boeing shares on March 5th of 2020, which was, conveniently one day before a House committee on which he sits released damaging findings on the company's handling of its 737 MAX jet, which was, of course, involved in 2 fatal crashes. Yeah, I don't know. Timing seems a little shady here. Could there be, number one, of course, conflict of interest, but also insider trading, which if we were accused of insider trading, we would be prosecuted. Okay, and it wouldn't be by a Senate ethics committee or a House ethics committee. It would be by, the Federal Trade Commission. They would be investigating to see if there was any insider trading happening. Even if you're a celebrity like Martha Stewart, you engage in insider trading, you will be prosecuted and you will spend time in prison. In this case, you have the leaders of this country, the people making decisions about critical legislation, potentially engaging in insider trading and just kind of getting away with it because they get cleared by ethics committees. Not interested. It's like the same thing that you see with police departments or specific cops who have been accused of excessive force, getting investigated through an internal group of people, an internal investigation. I'm not interested in an internal investigation. I'm interested in a real investigation to see if there's criminality here, if there's insider trading going on. Let me continue. Dr. Deborah Malumid, the wife of Lowenthal, the Democratic lawmaker Alan Lowenthal, bought or sold Sunrun, which installs solar energy systems in homes, on 97 occasions during a years-long period. During that time, Sunrun shares experienced two rallies, one that began late in 2019 and extended into early 2020. Keep this timing in mind, it's important. And a second, much bigger one after a market-wide rout caused by the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic in March. Okay. Now, in 2020, Lowenthal got real busy. Okay. Promoting what? Renewable energy. So in 2020, Lowenthal, a member of the House Committee on Natural Resources and the chairman of an energy-related subcommittee, was part of a bipartisan group that pushed for the inclusion of renewable energy companies in pandemic relief measures. Many of the protocols eventually passed last month as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. And guess what? That, of course, is going to mean, especially if you're invested in renewable energy companies like Sunrun, you're going to profit off of it because the government has just passed policies that prioritize renewables, including solar energy, wind, and in this case, companies that Lowenthal's wife had invested in. Now, in June of 2020, he also co-sponsored a bill to provide tax incentives for using renewable energy, but that never received a vote. Now, Sunrun shares began rallying about that time. By October, they had reached what at the time was a company high of $80 per share. They cost only $9 per share when Lowenthal's wife bought those shares earlier that year. So you can understand how much of a profit they made. But again, it's not just Democrats. Republicans are involved in this shady activity as well. Representative Mike Kelly's wife, Victoria Kelly, bought $15,000 to $50,000 worth of stock in the mining company Cleveland Cliffs, just one day after Representative Kelly's office learned that the Commerce Department would initiate a tariff investigation that might benefit the company. Representative Kelly had lobbied Trump's administration officials for additional tariff protections, according to an ethics office report. Kelly's purchase was the only trade she made in an individual stock that year, records suggest. She took a nearly 300% profit when she sold 8 months later. No, I'm sure it's totally innocent. I'm sure there was nothing wrong with those stock trades. I'm sure it had nothing to do with insider information that obviously we're not privy to. I'm sure it had nothing to do with the fact that, we're talking about an individual who gets to weigh in on policies that have impacts on the companies that he's invested in, his wife is invested in. So look, it's a necessity. It's incredibly important to pass this legislation, but we also need to be real about whether it's going to pass, how it would pass, and any Democrat who purports to be in favor of passing this legislation, but fails to address the very real problem of that legislative filibuster in the Senate is full of it. Again, it's nothing more than personal marketing for their campaign purposes and nothing more. I would like to see an actual fight to get that corruption out of Congress. And so far, haven't seen much of that. All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, John Iadarola will be joining us to cover stories that I missed in the first hour because we ran out of time. So we'll be back with conservatives losing their minds over what Lindsey Graham did yesterday in proposing a federal abortion ban. We'll be right back.
Indisputable has been named the fastest growing news TV show in the United States of America, compared to all shows on CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and roughly 30 others. What do we do on this show? We tell the truth. You know why we tell the truth? Because the truth is simply indisputable. Donald Trump radicalized citizens. He's the chief terrorist. Republicans still want you to think that critical race theory is the greatest evil that can happen in K through 12 education. It's not even taught. I guarantee you this, David. If he would have taken a knee during the national anthem to bring awareness to the need for more money for cancer research in America, he would not have had that response. It was the fact that he took a knee for black folk and brown folk. You rather pick the voters because you're scared of the voters picking the politicians. It frightens you. But we coming. When you are in a privileged position, equality looks like oppression to you. The Karenicity runs deep in this one. We provide a mirror for reflection and a mirror for correction.
So what if I have 35? Don't hit me. Don't touch me. Don't touch me.
So let's put up the graphic of this Karen in peak performance. Boom. They want anarchy so they can start creating their own rules.
Can you share with me some examples?
When they were running around during the terrorist attack on January 6th saying, hang Mike Pence. So those are the people I'm talking about. That's a problem, correct? You work for Mike Pence, stand up for the guy. Do not allow the ideology of politics to evaporate the humanity that still exists inside of you. They don't stop, I don't stop. Racism won't stop, I won't stop. Systemic bias won't stop, so I won't stop. People still need health care, so I won't stop. People still need criminal justice systems reformed in this country, so I won't stop. And you won't stop either.
Universal health care, raising the minimum wage, doing something about climate change and gun violence and an unjust justice system that locks up black and brown folks. We're not going for the okie doke no more.
I think Nina Turner is the leader of the progressive movement right now.
It is absolutely a sin and a shame to be in the 21st century in America and having people who are elected to office not only try to separate us, but also use public policy to make it harder to vote.
The questions that we get asked is how you gonna pay for it? I say, we gonna pay for it in the same way we pay for the tax cuts. That's how we gonna pay for it. We gonna pay for it in the same way that we give military industrial complex contractors. That's how we gonna pay for it.
If standing up for a universal health care or Medicare for all is wrong, Jing, I don't want to be right. If believing that working people deserve to have paid family and medical leave is wrong, I don't want to be right. If wanting everyday people of this nation to live a good life is wrong, then I don't want to be right.
And we are being tested whether we have courage enough, conviction enough, people power enough to stand up and do what is right for ourselves and generations yet unborn.
I'm Nina Turner, and I am unbought and unbossed.
I thought you knew when I smacked it back that I like.
Say hi to the camera.
I don't like this.
Welcome back, everyone. Anna Kasparian and John Iadarola with you. John, I feel like I understand you for the first time on how much you love to go into the studio to do the show. Because, we're doing this out of necessity, not because we want to work from home. And man, I gotta say, our whole team is so invaluable because it's so nice to not have to worry about the tech.
Yeah.
Like, it's so nice to have professionals focusing on the tech. But anyway, it's good to have you.
Yeah, it would be great to be back. We do the damage report in the morning, and I have a light, but most of the light comes in through a window, and it varies like to half and double, like from 1 minute to the next. So it's like dramatically changing how bright my image is. There's nothing I can do about it. I want to be back in the studio.
Yeah. The last 2 days, I've had this affinity for kicking my camera in the middle of talking. I'm sure Aishwarya has noticed that. It's been frustrating. Anyway, well, we've got a lot more news to get to. So why don't we get started with Lindsey Graham?
Why is Lindsey Graham 25 days out from ballots going out, galloping in and saying, we need a federal abortion ban? Really, where have you been, Lindsey Graham?
It's rare for me to say that something happening in politics is my favorite, but this is my favorite. Conservatives panicking over voters knowing who conservatives are and what they represent. After literally decades, nearly 50 years of attempting to dismantle and succeeding in dismantling reproductive rights for women, Republican candidates, Republican lawmakers are now running away from the issue because it turns out that most Americans do not want to strip women of their bodily autonomy. They don't want the government to get involved in these incredibly personal and intimate decisions. And so rather than campaigning on this massive victory that took them 50 years to accomplish, they're running away from it and even going after Senator Lindsey Graham pretty aggressively. Because just yesterday, he proposed a federal abortion ban that would ban abortions after 15 weeks. Now, the likelihood of that passing it's not going to pass. That just wouldn't pass. And so what we're seeing is this like effort to hide the fact that Lindsey Graham would promote this, push this, or that Republicans would even want this. Let's hear a little more from Charlie Kirk, and then we'll go to you, John.
That feels like election interference. And I say this as someone who is so pro-life. I would love a total abortion ban. 15 weeks is not enough, but I'm also not dumb. 25 days out from ballots going out, the Democrats are applauding. Thank you, Lindsey Graham, for making this issue about abortion. They're enthusiastic that Lindsey Graham is now making this all about the one issue Democrats actually can win suburban women on. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish that the country was as pro-life as I am.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, but it turns out the country isn't as pro-life as you are. In fact, a Kaiser Family Foundation poll from last month showed that 61% of Americans do not want to do away with reproductive rights for women. They don't want the government involved. Other polls actually showed an even higher percentage, about 2/3 of Americans not wanting the government involved. And I'm not surprised by that. I mean, of course. But John, is this election interference? Is Lindsey Graham proposing a conservative policy that Republicans have been fighting for 50 years? Is that election meddling? Is that what's happening right now?
Well, look, the difference between me and, for instance, Charlie Kirk is that I'm physically capable of empathy. And so I understand how annoying it would be for him to do this. Not just that he would do it, but to do it knowing it can't pass. That's like the part of it that I love the most, like that he's screwing them over. And it can't succeed. So that's amazing. I absolutely love it. It is funny, though, that like he says, I wish the country was as pro-life as me. I wish they wanted a full abortion ban, but they don't. Now, notice he's still going to try to make it happen. All of them are. The only reason they're mad at Graham is that he's doing this right now. Not that they're doing it. They want a full ban. They know that it's not popular. They know that people don't want it. And they will immediately jump in it if through one of the many ways that our political system is manipulated and rigged and structurally opposed to democracy, they can get the power to do it. That's how they got Roe v. Wade. All he's saying there is we need to be loyal to each other in deceiving the American people about what we want and what we intend to do. We totally want this, but we need to fool these people that we have no respect for whatsoever to make them think that we're not insane radicals just long enough for us to take power, and then we can do the thing that we're lying to them about right now.
No, No,
it's very transparent.
It is incredible. You know, I applaud Charlie Kirk for the first time ever in how candid and transparent he is. This might be the first time he has told the truth, because what he's saying here is, hey, dummy, Lindsey Graham, we're supposed to be lying to people, okay? The midterms are coming up. And I appreciate it. I really do. And he's not the only one. So Roger Stone also has some thoughts about Lindsey Graham's proposal, saying Lindsey Graham is purposely helping the Democrats to ensure that we do not take back the U.S. Senate. He's purposely doing it. Lindsey Graham, famous leftist, you know, engaging in this mass conspiracy to ensure that Republicans lose. Yeah, sure. Okay. And Stone continues to say, this federal election is about our safety, security, health, food supply, economy, free speech, and the corruption of our justice system unless rhinos and Democrats try to make it about federal abortion policy, which the U.S. Supreme Court made unnecessary. Listen, I have no love for Roger Stone, and I don't see any redeeming qualities with this guy. But I will say in the 1990s, he went on the record as supportive of reproductive rights. He also has a little bit of a salacious scandal in his past involving swinging and stuff. So I don't know if that had something to do with.
So that part's cool, but
I don't know if that had something to do with his more liberal views with abortion. But I do want to go to one more video before I go to you, John, and that's Marjorie Greene. Marjorie Greene, of all people, trying to pretend like Republicans aren't trying to ban abortion. Let's watch.
They believe the way to drive people to the polls is by scaring them. They're lying to women all over America saying that they can't have an abortion anymore, which that's a lie. There's plenty of places that women can easily get an abortion.
No, I mean, they're just trying to scare you and say that we're banning abortion. That's not true. You could still get an abortion totally. Yeah, I mean, if you're living in the middle of the country, if you're living in a red state, you have to spend literally thousands of dollars to travel out of state and pay for that abortion. But nonetheless, let's just pretend like Republicans didn't create that situation in the first place.
Yeah, 100%. Apologies. Apparently my mic is loud. We'll fix it in one of the breaks. But anyway, yeah, why are people freaking out? Why are they pretending that we're for this thing that we're totally for? We've been on the record for 50 years. This is literally the only thing that millions of our voters actually care about. We have chosen people for the Supreme Court exclusively to accomplish this goal. As soon as it happened, we cheered for 72 hours, then realized that people hate us and they think that we're crazy radicals. So now we need to pretend that we don't care. And what are you even complaining about? You can still get abortions in the places that we haven't successfully stripped it away from at the state level yet. We're trying in many states. They just did it in West Virginia. In state after state, they're pushing for it. Now, thankfully, in places like Kansas, the people overrode it. But like, she is lying in so many different directions simultaneously. She wants a federal ban. All of them do. Every single one of them. They are lying about it being a states' rights issue. That's not at all true. And in the states, it's not like, oh, we got what we wanted and now the status quo is good. No, they want to strip it away at the state level if they can't do it at the federal level. So all of this is utter dishonesty. They understand fundamentally that the people don't support their positions. Obviously, they're anti-democratic. They don't care about that. And for many of them, there's an extra layer of dishonesty. So for Roger Stone, he said the fact that the Supreme Court made it stripped away the protections means that it's unnecessary, implying that he is happy with the status quo. What you said was that he gave some indication he was pro-choice earlier on. Charlie Kirk talking about how I'm totally pro-life. I want to ban everywhere. I think he's perfectly happy for it to be banned everywhere because he believes that women are at best second-class citizens. But the idea that these guys care, they don't care. Charlie Kirk isn't being paid by millionaires and billionaires to do what he thinks passes as a show because he's really just driven by the spirit of evangelical Christianity. And he can't take the injustice of he doesn't care about any of that. This is about money. He is cosplaying being a pro-lifer, as so many of them are. Now, someone like Marjorie Greene, she's a legitimate psychopath. She might actually believe some of these things. I don't doubt that some of them do. But for many of them, especially these men, it is a way to control people, especially women, in pursuit of economic goals that are always going to be far more important to them.
1,000%. Now, I leave you with one more video, And it is someone I didn't expect to go on the record because he's been particularly horrendous when it comes to stripping women of their bodily autonomy. And that's Matt Walsh. Let's watch.
It's almost like he wants Republicans to lose. That's the conspiracy theory that I would actually subscribe to here. He wants Republicans to lose. This is sabotage. It's the only way to explain it. Given who it's coming from, especially. It's one thing if this is coming from someone in Congress who's just been deeply pro-life, a pro-life activist for years, and this has been their number one issue. And so they, and this is all they talk. This is one of their central things they talk about all the time. And they're just so excited about it that they maybe put the cart before the horse a little bit and came out and proposed this right before the midterms. That would be one thing. Now, I'd still say it's a bad political strategy, but then at least I could believe that it's sincere.
Yeah, John, I mean, obviously, Lindsey Graham, he's the problem, right? Lindsey Graham's the problem. Like, are we forgetting about the fact that this is, again, policy that people like when Roe v. Wade was reversed, Matt Walsh went on Twitter and was just, John, is everything okay in your room? Like, what's happening, right? Can you mute yourself?
I don't really hear anything. I don't understand what's going on.
I don't know. It sounds like you're falling out of your chair, but you're not. So anyway, all right.
There's literally no sound.
I don't know.
In this
I don't know
room.
what that sound is. Okay, let's just.
I apologize.
I want to pull my hair out today because of the tech issues. It's driving me
apologize.
freaking nuts. Okay, so anyway, it's incredible because even Matt Walsh, who couldn't shut up about how happy he was, how giddy he was at women being stripped of their rights, is now turning around and scolding Lindsey Graham for doing what Lindsey Graham is supposed to do as a Republican lawmaker. But again, it's all about tricking voters. It's all about hiding the fact that they, on one hand, purport to be in favor of freedom, individual liberty. On the other hand, want to control the lives and bodies of women in this country. That is what the reality is. They support unpopular policies. They will push through unpopular policies even if their own voters don't want them. They just want to make sure they do it in a way that is strategic for them and doesn't hurt them when elections are coming up. That's what's really going on.
Yeah.
And it's just an incredible thing to see.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a quick break.
Okay.
We're going to be right back with more news, including Dark Brandon. I'm kind of into this Dark Brandon phase. I know it's because midterms are coming up, but it's a good look. He should continue it after the midterms. That and more coming up. Hey guys, got a lot of comments, so I'm going to read through as many as I can. Atomic Elbow in our Twitch section says, and by the way, thank you for resubbing for the 27th month. Happy to be able to share another month with my TYT family. Thank you for that. We've got Ray Dragon, who says, John and Anna are such a great combo, great comedic chemistry and banter. It's usually much better when we're hosting in person, but thank you for saying that. Century 22 says, I may convert to Christian Itty. Oh, meaning Christian, my husband Christian. I see you. I'm like, wait, why are you telling me this? No, thank you for that. Anna, your hair looks great. Dragon says, I have a wild idea. If the government is so concerned about the workers striking, then how about they mandate that their needs are met rather than mandate workers can't strike? 100%. Actually, it's such a great point. Instead of even pressuring the employer in this case to provide that time off, we could have mandatory time off as a federal policy, but we don't really see that happening. Jam Frazier resubbed with Prime for 2 months. Second month of Bezos bucks, and I've never been a follower. Oh, I've been a follower and fan for years. When I found TYT, I found my family. Thank you so much for what you do. Much love to the host crew, various chat mods, and the TYT community. I love my TYT fam. All right, let's go to, how much time do we have? Let's go to Felicity91. I love this real talk segment with Anna. Thank you. Killa writes in and says, I'm actually surprised that Stephanie Ruhle here would call out Nancy Pelosi. Yeah, I mean, she was fine in that segment. She just was. I don't have any critique for how she handled that segment. Burning Bush Dragon says, I was so happy to hear that the New York Times was doing an investigation into the stock trades of members of Congress. Do you guys hear that? That's what I'm talking about. What is that? What does that sound?
I don't know. I have literally no idea. I've used this exact mic in this exact situation on many shows recently. I don't know.
Okay, we're going to take a break and get back to the show. It might take a few minutes because we got to figure out what that noise is. We'll be right back. Everyone, back to the show. Anna Kasparian, John Iadarola. Let's get right to our next story.
Rick Scott of Florida proposed a plan. I wish I had enough copies to hand, but go online and look at it. Proposed a plan requiring Congress to vote on the future of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid every 5 years. It's up for reauthorization. And I want to remind you, you paid for your Social Security. Every single paycheck from the time you were a kid, you paid for it. So every 5 years, Congress gets to vote, change, cut, reduce, or eliminate the entirety of Social Security.
Imagine what it would be like to have a Democratic Party that sounds like that, not just when we're approaching midterms or general election, but when, it's the middle of the year, there's no campaigning happening, and they actually mean what they say. That would be amazing, right? It would be incredible. And what we've been seeing from Joe Biden in the past few weeks has been pretty good. Pretty good. He's not perfect. Obviously, I want more in terms of social spending. But I'll say that the dark Brandon label is beginning to earn it, especially when he's calling people out by name. And in that speech, which was meant, by the way, to celebrate the Inflation Reduction Act and its passage, he specifically mentioned Rick Scott. And he did that for good reason. Rick Scott is the one who's trying to promote policies that would increase taxes, not for the rich, not for corporations, but specifically for people who are so poor that they don't pay federal taxes. He wants to target them, okay? He also wants to cut Medicare and Social Security, two incredibly popular programs. And so when he heard that Biden had called him out, he decided to tweet this. Joe Biden said he wished he had enough copies of my Rescue America plan. So I stopped by the White House today to make sure he did. He also included a super goofy photo of himself holding his book. But Joe Biden responded to it. He quote tweeted it saying, "Couldn't agree more, Rick. And if anyone else wants to read your plan to put Social Security and Medicare on the chopping block, they should go to joebiden.com/Rick Scott's plan. Thanks for stopping by." So this is something, John, that I've been trying to get Democrats, trying through our show, of course, which isn't really as effective because they probably aren't paying attention. But nonetheless, having a message that specifically attacks Republicans and how they want to make people's lives materially worse is much smarter than just simply, whatever else they've engaged in recent decades, right? I feel like they also engage in whatever issue. It could be culture, it could be identity. Not to say that those issues are unimportant, but they tend to lean on those issues in lieu of talking about what matters to all voters, which is their financial stability, their economic health. That kind of stuff matters too. Healthcare, here we're talking about Medicare as well. And so I like the messaging here, and I wish that he continued it.
Yeah. By the way, I begin to speak extremely worried about what's going to happen. But the only way that it could have been stronger is if, with it being Rick Scott and the topic being Medicare, Rick Scott's history of massive fraud in that area, maybe he could have added that in, maybe make it a threat or something. But it is good. He's apparently decided at this point in his first term that the malarkey stops here, and that's good. I agree. There's multiple levels of good communication or good, like, using your position. This is better than what they normally do, or especially Democrats like Joe Biden normally do. Of course, it is not as good as actually delivering. Like, in theory, protecting those things is better than not. Although I would add the historic context of the Democrats not over the past couple of decades occasionally standing with Republicans to put limitations or consider limitations of those things would make it an even more effective attack. But good, they haven't done that in a little bit, so that's nice. And it isn't like he hasn't delivered in the recent history with the student debt cancellation, although I have some major concerns around that have just developed this week, as well as the climate change bill. But while I agree, I like the new Dark Brandon. I want to see more of it in terms of the rhetoric. As I've said, initially, once they pass student loan debt, like, it's only going to last so long. You need to keep actually delivering.
Yes.
And maybe some people would say, well, we're so close to an election, I just don't think that they're going to do it again. Well, like, first of all, that's a great time to do something. But there's a lot of problems that he could still unilaterally solve. And so I want to see that at the same time.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's not just about the rhetoric. You do have to deliver. I think that the student debt forgiveness plan by Biden is, obviously I'd like to see way more. But you actually shared a statistic with me a week ago that just blew my mind about how the amount of debt that will be forgiven, which is somewhere between $10,000 to $20,000, depending on whether or not you needed Pell Grants when you were going to school, it actually ends up wiping out 50% of student loan debt for Latinx borrowers, which is incredible. That statistic is incredible. So I really don't want to minimize that and the positive impact it has. But for me, what was even more impressive about that debt forgiveness plan is what happens with the amount that you're expected to pay back in your student loans. It's dependent on what your discretionary income is, and Biden capped it at 5% of your discretionary income, meaning, you know, money that you have left over after paying for shelter, paying for your necessities, right, to survive, which means for most people, 5% of that might be nothing because of how expensive it is to live in America at this point, especially in some of these big cities. So I don't want to erase that either. But I agree with you about the need to continue with the wins, making people whole, passing policies that make their economic situation far more stable, far more healthy. And to just quickly reference what you were talking about regarding Democrats sometimes joining Republicans in the call to cut Social Security. Remember, Obama was open to that. It was part of his so-called grand bargain. He was willing to concede some cuts to Social Security to get Republicans on board with other policies that he was trying to implement. In the end, it didn't work out, and I'm happy it didn't work out. But it's really nice to see that difference between Obama and Biden. And Social Security recipients are actually going to see a pretty decent jump in the amount of money they receive through Social Security under Biden. So they're actually going to get more money under Biden's leadership. And I think that's also a good thing.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know if we have time to go into the details on Rick Scott's plan, but I love the production you've done for that, because I had forgotten just how awful it was. Like, honestly, all I want is for the national conversation leading up to the midterms to be about Rick Scott's plan, because I think that's as good as Lindsey Graham trying to do a national abortion ban, I think.
No, totally. And this is why Mitch McConnell slapped him down, because he's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Okay, this is not good. Don't propose that low income earners have to pay minimum tax, federal tax. That's insane. That's not going to be popular. Nonetheless, that part of his proposal was actually taken out because of how incredibly unpopular it is. But make no mistake, what he's proposing currently is pretty terrible. So children will be forced to say the Pledge of Allegiance, salute the flag, and learn about how America is awesome in school. So that's part of his. There's a lot of culture war stuff in here, right? Government can no longer ask citizens to disclose race or ethnicity on government forms. Gee, I wonder why they want that. They want to refund and respect the. How do you enforce that? How do you enforce that? How do you? Okay, the whole notion of refunding the police. Let me just note. Any municipality that actually attempted to cut police funding immediately reversed that decision. So congratulations, your refund the police proposal has already happened. Mm-hmm. The other thing I wanted to mention is you can't enforce respect for the police. What does that even mean? I mean,
Anna, I feel like that's sort of been the de facto rule for a long time. Right? It's not like a law from Congress, but the cops certainly expect it. And if you don't respect the police, they'll give you some punishments right on the spot, actually.
You know, they really do want to live in a country that they can dub land of the free, home of the brave, right? I mean, land of the free obviously means that you should immediately defer to cops and respect them. And it should be enforceable. It should be a part of our rule of law. Insane. Okay, so let's continue. Finish building the border wall and name it. Name it after Trump, because of course he wants to do right by his daddy. Stopping socialism. He proposes that we shrink the federal government, reduce the government workforce by 25% in 5 years, and sell government buildings and assets. So that goes along with his, hey, we want to cut all funding to any program that actually benefits people, makes their lives better. Eliminate all federal programs that can be done locally and enact term limits for Congress. And stop left-wing efforts to rig elections. Are you going to go after Lindsey Graham too? Is he also rigging elections with his anti-abortion proposal? Protect, defend, and promote the American, aka nuclear family. Men and then of course the same transgender, anti-transgender bigotry. Men are men, women are women. So there's a lot of culture war stuff in there, but you should also read in between the lines and see that he wants to, yes, cut Social Security and Medicare and cut government programs that help needy Americans.
Yeah, well, I mean, the issue is that there aren't enough details here. So if we're supposed to protect, defend, and promote the American family, obviously then you need to have consequences for people who violate the traditional nuclear family. So with Trump having multiple families and kids with multiple people, how many years in prison should he spend, Rick Scott? I mean, that's totally not the nuclear family. Well, I guess it's nuclear families. Maybe he'll like that. Rudy Giuliani, how many times can he, how many times can he get divorced? How many times can he cheat on his wives? That's a violation, a spitting in the face of the nuclear family. So what fine should he pay? 50,000, 100,000? I would love to know. Or is this only about gay people? No, this is really only about gay people, isn't it? Yeah. Fun.
Yeah. I mean, they're so innovative with their policy proposal. I mean, who could have expected this? Such big-brained ideas. Anyway, we got to take a break. When we come back, we have more news for you, including some updates on the Alex Jones trial. The Sandy Hook trials continue to seek out damages. And we'll talk about Mike Lindell. His phone got seized. He's very upset about it. That and more coming right up. All right, our super chat section blowing up with people who have things to say about me smashing the desk early on in the show. Bethune writes in and says, people need to smash the like button the way Anna smashes her desk when there's a technical issue. Yeah, today's show's been really frustrating. This week
it's frustrating.
Very frustrating.
You want to just do your job, and it's hard to do sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Lisa Holmes writes in, actually does not write in. Thank you, Lisa, for the super chat. Steve Gunther says, Anna, I want to thank you for being a warrior for the people. I know it's taxing, hard on your mental health, scary, overwhelming, but you keep coming back. We can never repay you. Thank you. You're going to make me cry. Thank you for that. Yeah, this job's really hard. Sam writes in and says, I have a feeling the noise might be the Booger Man, the thing from Uranus, or Earthworm Jim. Maybe. We've got...
We'll be seizing their phones.
We've got Spectaphonic, who says, I just got to get real. Anna is fire. She and Jank brought me into TYT. And yes, that noise is insane. We still don't know what that noise was, but we somehow miraculously fixed it by restarting our call. So hopefully it won't come back.
Which makes a ton of sense, by the way. So that's fun.
Yeah,
it doesn't make any sense. Why would that be what it is?
History Speaks writes in and says, I'm pleased that TYT has taken a sensible stance on Ukraine. Some leftists seem to be drunk on cliches about U.S. imperialism, which have little to no relevance to our policy of helping Ukraine fight for self-determination. Yes, I agree. I don't think we should have a one-size-fits-all approach to everything. I don't think that we should immediately lean on talking points that we've applied to other issues. And look, it's not that I fell into it before the war started, when the State Department was warning everyone that Russia was preparing to invade Ukraine. I just don't trust the State Department because of the past and what they've lied about when it comes to various wars we've engaged in. So I was just it's not that I was dismissive. I was a little cynical about the State Department, and I was wrong. It turns out that their intel was correct. And yeah, Russia invaded a sovereign country. So thank you for that comment. I really appreciate it. A Man from Earth says, I stopped smoking cigarettes 3 months ago after smoking for 27 years. I feel so good. Go Dark Brandon. Good for you, A Man from Earth. That's not an easy thing to do. Jesus. Wow. So congratulations. All right, let's go to our members, our YouTube members. We've got some new members, including Frank Boyle. Thank you for that. We've got Winston Sayer, who wants to comment about Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk's head looks like a cannonball. I agree with you on that. People love to talk about his head shape.
His show came in like a wrecking ball, actually.
Margarita on the Rock says, I love me some Nina living for her show. Nina's fantastic. John Gladden became a member. Adrian Carhuyo also became a member. We've got Lisa Holmes. Thank you so much for supporting the show, Lisa. Lupus Warrior also became a member. Sam Waldowski became a member. Hopefully I didn't butcher your name. Thank you for your support. And James Nelson says, that interview just opened my eyes. Thank you. Check out his podcast. It's really good. The show just flew by today, John. Just flew by.
I can't believe it's almost the end of the hour.
Well,
That's
it's
crazy.
It's not the end of the show past 5, because if you're a member, you can check out our bonus episode. We will be talking about the minor leagues and how they have just joined the MLB union. My husband, who used to be a professional baseball player, will be joining us to talk about that and his experiences when he was in the minor league. Don't miss it. It's going to be a great bonus episode for our members. You can become a member by going to tyt.com/join, or just click on that join button if you're watching us on YouTube. Let's get to our next story.
This stunningly cavalier attitude with respect to their discovery obligations is what led to the default in the first place. The defendants have consistently engaged in dilatory and obstructive discovery practices from the inception of these cases right through to the trial.
You just heard from the judge who is presiding over Alex Jones's second trial to determine damages he owes for defamation of Sandy Hook families. And yes, he had just stood trial. That had to do with one specific family he had defamed with his accusations of the shooting being a false flag and all of that. Now there is the second trial, which is taking place in a different state. And the judge is furious with Alex Jones and his attorneys for just refusing to do what they're supposed to do when they're standing trial, which is through discovery, you have to provide the documents that are expected of you. And in this case, it has to do with documents pertaining to Google Analytics. And it's important to have those documents because it's important to determine just how much money Alex Jones, through his company, has brought in. Now, the defense lawyers for a group of family of Sandy Hook victims asked the judge to sanction Jones for not disclosing web data about his coverage of the shooting. The lawyers wanted to draw connections between the Google Analytics data that Jones, the Google Analytics data and Jones's merchandise sales. And so it's important to do that to show just how much profit he made off of the lies he was spewing in regard to these victims and their family members. Now, Jones turned over data up through June of 2019, but that didn't reveal data from the last 3 years, which Jones's lawyers claimed didn't exist, but it did, in fact, exist. So Norm Pattis, a longtime attorney for Jones and InfoWars, said he was not happy that InfoWars hadn't turned over the Google Analytics data, but he argued it was not relevant. Oh, it's not relevant. Oh, fascinating. And there was no evidence that InfoWars had used this data to shape its own on-air coverage. But the judge, Judge Barbara Bellis, disagreed and ended up sanctioning Jones. Let's watch.
Perhaps the most egregious representation in the filings states that the defendant contends and has always contended that neither he nor the various entities with which he is affiliated has such data, and that there was nothing more that could be done. The defendants knew of the existence of the Google Analytic documents at a time these representations were made to the court by their counsel. The court hereby sanctions the defendants by precluding them from presenting evidence or argument that they did not profit from the Sandy Hook coverage.
And let's be clear, from the first trial, we learned that not only did Alex Jones and InfoWars profit handsomely off of their disgusting defamatory Sandy Hook coverage, they made, in some cases, as much as $800,000 a day. Okay, $800,000 a day. John, I mean, are we really surprised that Alex Jones, who ended up losing the defamation case because he refused to cooperate and hand over documents, is playing the same game again? Like, come on.
I think he's got his heart in the right place. I just think he's a little bit absent-minded, a little bit bad with paperwork, a little bit deranged. Yeah, no, he's going to continue to do it, and he will continue to do it in the same way that Trump is going to continue to drag out these legal processes as long as they're allowed to, which is apparently as long as they want. When you're worth hundreds of millions of dollars, as you know, Alex Jones supposedly is, or billions of dollars, as supposedly Donald Trump is, you can apparently do literally whatever you want. If one of us were brought into court, we were to spit on the floor once, we'd spend a year in jail, or we'd be fined a massive amount. But for them, it doesn't matter. The judges just will not actually hit them hard enough to make them comply. So they can continue to show absolute disrespect for the process, disrespect for the victims of their various crimes. And the fact that, look, the legal ins and outs, my eyes glaze over eventually because, you know, as in many cases, I have no real hope that there will be any justice. But the stuff that we find out along the way, the idea that he made $800,000 in one day off of selling like gorilla penis pills or something. No, but seriously, how is that possible? I understand some people watch him. Like, do you know how many people need to call in and buy $50 worth of your fake supplements to add up to $800,000 in a day? Like, it almost doesn't even seem possible. I don't know exactly what the breakdown for that is, but that's madness. That so many people, many of whom just, they think it's a fun show or whatever, that so many of them would buy something as esoteric as like brain fuel or whatever. How is that possible?
Well, I mean, remember, we learned this from the first trial to determine what he would have to pay in damages. One of the supplements he sells is literally named InstaHard. So I'm sure you can be creative and imagine what that's about. And look, preying on people's insecurity is very lucrative, and I think that has a lot to do with it. But I also want to note that, remember, Alex Jones is attempting to skirt having to pay damages by declaring bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. And he's so stupid that he went on Steven Crowder's show today and bragged about his book sales. Do you, Boo?
Okay, no, the idea that his followers are buying books is even more ridiculous than them buying InstaHard. I ain't reading those books.
I mean, first of all, good. Good if they're not reading those books. I can't imagine what kind of lunacy is within those pages. But look, the point I'm trying to make here is this is a guy who has profited off of the pain and suffering of others. He's a massive grifter. He doesn't care whose life or whose lives he destroys as long as he's turning a profit. And it's very rare to see stories where there's some justice or chickens come home to roost when it comes to these bad guys. But it does appear that in this case, chickens have come home to roost. And this is just the beginning, okay? He's going to face several trials to determine damages for the many families he defamed through his Sandy Hook coverage. So we'll keep you guys updated on that as the story develops. But for now, I think it's important to cover this Mike Lindell story. That'll be the last story of the main show. And then we'll kick it over to the bonus episode for our members, tyt.com/join to become one. Let's do it.
She goes, we're taking your cell phone. We have a warrant for your cell phone. I go, no. I said, my whole company, I run 5 companies off that. I don't have a computer. My hearing aids run off this. Everything runs off my phone. I said, And then I said, if I don't give it to you, will you arrest me then? And I was just, I'm going, are you kidding me? You're not getting my phone. And he shows me this arrest warrant. We're going to put it up here in a thing, or not, this phone arrest phone to arrest my phone.
A warrant for your phone.
He goes,
the election was stolen from Trump. He wanted to assist in overturning the results of the 2020 election. And as you might have gathered from that unhinged interview, the FBI apparently surrounded him at a Hardee's fast food drive-thru to basically seize his phone. And that is what he's complaining about. Now, cars pulled up in front of us, he says, to the side of us and behind us. And I said, those are either bad guys or the FBI. Well, it turns out they were the FBI. He later posted a grand jury subpoena from a federal prosecutor in Colorado and a search warrant related to a federal investigation into breached voting machines in Mesa County, Colorado. We had done some coverage on that. And the warrant requests all records of information on the Lindell cell phone that constitute fruits, evidence, or instrumentalities of violations relating to identity theft, intentional damage to a protected computer, and conspiracy to commit the previous two crimes. The warrant cites violations involving Tina Peters, Conan James Hayes, Belinda Kinsley, Sandra Brown, Sharona Bishop, Michael Lindell, and or Douglas Frank, among other co-conspirators known and unknown to the government. And by the way, the Denver FBI office did in fact confirm that they seized Mike Lindell's phone, which I would be shocked if Lindell didn't expect it to happen, but it is Mike Lindell. So I don't know, maybe I'm being too generous to his ability to engage in critical thinking. I don't know. John, what do you think?
Yeah, I was talking this morning and I really don't know what to think of it. Comparing the reaction of Mike Lindell, assuming that everything is as he says it is, and obviously we've gotten some information, but not a ton of information from law enforcement. He's like, he went on every show, basically his own show. He did interviews on other shows to talk about it and how much of a victim he is and how willing he was to be hauled in. They love talking about how strong they are, how much you're not going to get my phone. Here it is. Steve Bannon, you left to kill me. Where do I go? I started right here. Okay. Why do they make these claims? Or if they're going to make the claims and then immediately backtrack on them, why don't any of the viewers think, well, but didn't you say you were going to die? I was like I made popcorn. I was going to watch that and then you ruined it. But anyway, there's no accountability, so they can do whatever they want. Whereas Stephen Miller, he was asked a couple of times by Laura Ingraham whether his phone had been seized, and he refused to answer the question, despite being presented an amazing opportunity to make himself out to be a big victim who the deep state is targeting. It's a very different response. The issue, of course, is that Stephen Miller, while being, like thoroughly evil and all that, he's also at least somewhat savvy, somewhat slick. Mike Lindell is an absolute maniac. So I don't know, maybe he should keep his cards, closer to the chest, but he's not. The thing is, any one of them could have important information on their phone. Them, people like Sean Hannity, Roger Stone. We need access to that stuff. The issue, though, is seizing Mike Lindell's phone now. It feels to me like going looking for the documents after your year and a half. You might find something if they were so lazy that they didn't cover their tracks with so much time being provided. But there was all the time in the world for Mike Lindell to get rid of his text messages, get rid of his emails, whatever.
No, you're exactly right about that. But that's why I say it would be shocking if you didn't expect at some point authorities to either do a raid of your home or to seize your technology. If you are engaging in attempts to overturn the results of our democratic process in electing a president, right? But that's the thing, John. We also have to remember we don't have that entitlement mentality. So if I ever did something that I knew was against the law, I broke the law, I engaged in some sort of criminality, I'd be terrified that I'm going to get caught, right? You and I would have probably erased our phones or whatever it is, right? I mean, we would never engage in the criminality.
I'm going to do it right now just in case. Give me a sec.
But anyone with two brain cells to rub together would know, all right, well, I committed a crime. Now it's time to cover my tracks. Remember, we're talking about entitled individuals who think they're above the law. That's Mike Lindell.
Yeah.
That's MAGA. So
yeah.
Anyway, we're out of time. The show flew by today. So apologies that we didn't get to the furry story that I can't wait to talk about. We'll do that tomorrow. In the bonus episode today, Christian will be joining us to talk about the minor leagues joining the MLB union. Really, really great news. But aside from celebrating that good news, I want you guys to understand what minor league players had to deal with or have to deal with. Terrible conditions, terrible pay, that and more coming up in the bonus episode. tyt.com/join. We'll see you there.
You know what the progressive movement needs?